Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Pixel, an interview show where I, your host, Max Roberts, talk to different people in the video game industry, whether they are developers or journalists or different people inside the industry, and learn their stories and share them with you, and hopefully you guys all find it interesting. This is a part of Model Citizens Media, so you can go over to modelcitizensmedia.com and check out all our podcasts over there. And with me this week, or this month, it's not a weekly show, it's a monthly show, is none other than the co-founder of IGN, Per Schneider. Hi, Per.
What's up, Max? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Really quick, before we get into it, I just wanted everyone to know that I am an IGN freelancer. I do some wiki stuff. This is actually the first time that Per and I have talked, but I just wanted everyone to know that up front before we go into anything, so don't figure it out later. No collusion here, no inside scoop or anything. It's actually pretty easy.
This means you're not going to ask any tough questions then?
No, that doesn't mean that.
All right.
Because I want to ask tough questions. And normally on the show we dig into the origins of the people and their companies, but for you today, Per, I'm deciding to skip a little bit of that because I actually think, for all you listeners, Per just did, maybe a month ago, an episode of a podcast called Pockets Full of Soup with Jared Petty. And I think that actually is a pretty good look inside to you yourself as a person, and then a little bit into the history of IGN and how you got into there.
Yep.
I feel like those are pretty good. And I wanted to focus today on your interaction with the company and how IGN itself has responded throughout the ages and evolved over its past 20 years. And you've been there almost 20 years. You're 19 going on 20.
Yeah.
That's a majority of my life.
Well, there are two components to the IGN brand. There's the company that was founded in 1999, and there's the brand that actually predates me a little bit, goes back to 1996.
Yes.
So that's, in the very beginning, it was an affiliate network, so a network of websites called the Imagine Games Network. So that one is, 21 years old?
That's almost 21, yeah. And then IGN Entertainment is going on closer to 20 now. That was one of the most interesting parts of the history. It was figuring out when the IGN Today actually started.
Yeah.
My first question for you that I wanted to dive into, and I think I just got to flip my paper over here, is you said in an interview, and I actually don't have it written down which one right here, but you were talking about the .com crash and when you guys started IGN Insider, or now it's IGN Prime. And one of the things that you guys did was you put the message boards behind the paywall of IGN Prime and stuff. And that kind of inspired this question of what has been the biggest hurdle with audience expectations at IGN? Because you've talked about the expectations of the audience change over time and you have to figure out how to serve them instead of serving you. So what's been the biggest hurdle with how the audience expects IGN's content?
Well, the biggest expectation that the audience places on us is that, content is accurate, content is new, content is fast, content is not duplicated, and content is, is not heavily monetized. So they're easily accessible, right? There are a bunch of expectations that are very difficult to meet if you want to run a business, of course. So you'll get the message that I would watch this, but I don't want to watch an ad, therefore I'm going to skip it, right? There's that kind of the kind of expectation that you make it very easy for users to get into the content, consume it, and so forth. But that goes back to the .com crash, where the expectation for all online content was that it was free. All the tools were free, and that you would add, new types of content on top of what you already provided. So at the time, we were providing a lot of text content, a lot of articles, lots of strategy guides. We actually made the strategy guide subscription at the same time as well. So we took kind of our free guides content away. Now, it kind of worked back then because there was also an audience expectation that when you walk into a store and you buy a strategy guide, a beautiful one with lots of pictures, you'd have to pay $20, $10 to $20 for it. And so, it wasn't that crazy that we charged for that. With message boards, it was a different story where, you're basically kind of locking a community, which meant that you'd also be limiting its growth.
Okay. And so how are those expectations changing now in today's landscape of 2017 and IGN? You guys are on a slew of platforms. You're all over the place. How do you manage the expectations of all these different communities?
So it's tough. I mean, it's a real challenge to be everything to everybody at all times and everywhere. I mean, to begin with, we created international outlets for IGN. So our content that we create for the US and the UK and Australia also gets translated into local languages. But depending on what nation you're in, we also layer other content on top. So the hottest games in China are often very, very different from the hottest games in the United States, right? So we're meeting the expectations of local consumers. That doesn't mean that, people who speak English in foreign countries can't still go to the core property and get that kind of US angle from us, but that exists. And then when it comes to the different platforms, I think that's where it gets a little bit more challenging, because a YouTube audience expects us to be fast with the news and on that platform basically at the same time as everywhere else. Now, that's not necessarily good for us as a business, right? We make the most money if you go to the IGN website and you watch a video there. There's no question about that. Because we keep 100% of the revenue from any advertisement that video drives. There's the potential that once you're there, we can send you on to another IGN video and show you more ads and obviously monetize that better. The moment you work with an external platform, it gets a little bit more complicated, because somebody may watch a review on the IGN YouTube channel, but then their next video may be for a competing outlet because YouTube controls that experience. But you also have to give half the revenue away to the platform holder. And so I think the expectations have evolved kind of lockstep with the kind of website expectation. Be fast, be immediate, be honest, have a definite viewpoint. But once you start playing in a ecosystem like a YouTube, you're stepping into a house that is now being dominated by individual contributors. So YouTubers rather than media brands. And so I think the audience there expects a little bit more from us and a little bit different things. They expect for our voices and our personalities to be recognizable and consistent. And that is at odds sometimes with the nature of content production. Sometimes I've got an entire team out covering an event, but 5 games come out. So I need to freelance out the content to trusted reviewers. But then to the YouTube audience, those voices aren't known. And that's a very different experience from being subscribed to a single YouTuber whose voice you trust.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do kind of the same thing. Specifically, I used to do it with Colin Moriarty, who was a part of Kind of Funny, but then left to do his own thing. I always trusted his reviews. I still remember when his Last of Us review went up, because I was very excited that he was the one reviewing that game. It's kind of become those people, and I think IGN does have those personalities, both in reviews and then on-camera personalities, and sometimes they double up. I know Marty Sleva is pretty good with his reviews. Like, he's a guy I like to go to and trust, and you have all these different people there. So I think you guys have built up people that you can identify all over the place.
Yeah, but there is the time limitation, right? Unlike a YouTuber who creates content every day and posts a piece of content, a simple produced piece of content every day. There are all sorts of different things, right? If we want to get you exclusive videos of Destiny, we have to send some folks down to Activision in LA, right? So we send people on a trip, during which time they can't produce. And I think that's where it gets challenging with a platform like YouTube. You loved Colin's Last of Us review, but what if it wasn't available for Uncharted 4 and you bring in the new voice? What happens is the fans then say, well, I don't trust him or her. Mm-hmm. I want to hear from Colin. And so that's where, the way we counter that a little bit is by having talk shows, obviously. The podcast, right? You've got Beyond Unlocked, NVC, GameScoop, where we can then bring those people back and have them give their opinions, even if it's not the review. But like you say, we do a good job at it still. Thank you very much. But I think that is one of our big challenges, that consistency of voice, to make sure that the users can actually identify with the people telling them, giving their opinion, so that we don't come across as being just this authoritative kind of, stamp of approval that you place on a package shop.
Kind of. I wanted to want to jump to a question I had a little later, but I think it makes a little bit more sense now that we're talking about that voice and those personalities and stuff. I've been consuming specifically the podcast from IGN probably for 6 years now, and I've noticed kind of a change in the guard. Greg, Colin, Mitch, Jared, and most recently Jose left. And Jose was my favorite. I loved MVC with him on it. He was great. How do you guys deal with that when people leave to go on to do something new or different?
Well, it depends. I mean, usually when people leave, I would say it's fair to say that we don't have a morale problem with just people sitting around being upset and saying, hey, I need to do something different because I hate this job, right? Mm-hmm. What you're running into, in our case, it's a little bit more of the SNL problem, right? Where SNL brings in comedians, they stick around for a few years, but they can also develop their persona, prove themselves, and suddenly they get a late night show, or, they're starring in a movie, or they're going in a different direction and exploring new media. And so what we have to deal with, quite frankly, is we assign somebody to cover things that they're excited about. They become very visible to the makers of those very things that they're excited about. And then before you know it, they join that company, because that is ultimately, I mean, what could be cooler than when you're covering Nintendo to be able to go behind the curtain and see the stuff even earlier and to play a role in developing that content. And so that's why you see from IGN, you see folks go to Nintendo, to Sony, to Marvel, to DC, past people have left. You also sometimes see, like you saw with Greg and Tim and Colin, to go on their own, and Nick. If I forget to mention Nick, you'll get mad. But where they basically said, okay, well, we have an audience that loves the content we create, but we don't have any ownership. Can we go on our own and do what we already love doing, but be kind of like the lords of our own domain and own it? And obviously, not everybody's got the drive for that. It's tremendously hard, right? Like anybody who goes it alone is going to have to work a lot harder than they work at IGN, right? Because when somebody wants to go on vacation, we'll have somebody else to fill their role, and it's more difficult to do when you're the business owner. Mm-hmm. You got to pay for every trip and all that too. Right. So it's just a reality of the business. It's how you deal with having people who are customer facing. Mm-hmm. In some cases, the customers are users. In some cases, the customers are companies too. Who then go, I love this guy on IGN. Let's bring him in.
So then, how do I want to put this? How does the audience respond to that kind of stuff then? We could use Jose as a more recent example. He just left, and MVC has been passed on to you until you guys bring in a new Nintendo guy, which applications applications were put up and people can apply for that job. So how does the audience react to that?
Well, it depends. I mean, there are people who are really bummed because we are trying to create something that is casual and friendly with our podcast. And you may have noticed that we're very careful to not be the snarky gamer voice, mm-hmm. right? We like to see IGN as being a celebration of gaming. That doesn't mean that we can't be angry about things, or we can't be critical, or we can't come down on a game that disappointed us. But it means that we are respectful, and that we don't just use snark, to satisfy some populist goals. It's very easy to get a lot of traffic by being a jerk. And so what happens is then there are not a lot of villains on the staff. It's a lot of heroes, a lot of people that the listeners and the viewers like. And when somebody like that leaves, it leaves a mark, right? People feel like, oh my God, this is this piece of my life that I look forward to every week, and now it's gone. It's like when your favorite TV show ends, it leaves a void. The good news is that, we try hard to fill those voids by making sure that we discover new people, mm-hmm. and NVC in particular, it's a show that's been around for a very, very long time. You know, it was hosted way back when, Week in Review by Matt Casamassina, and then, you know, Mark Bozon joined. We had Craig Harris on it, obviously. And then, you know, there was a change of the guard with Rich and Audrey doing the content. There were other folks, you know, Scott Bromley was on it, Sam Claiborne. So it has evolved and changed over the years, but, you know, it's hard to replace somebody like Jose, who kind of took the lead and turned it into something different. So that's why, you know, when we're looking for a replacement, I'm not going to be able to do this every week, right? I need somebody who owns NVC and the relationship with the audience when I'm not around and I'm doing my day job. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we need somebody who really identifies with Nintendo games, somebody who really loves Nintendo games, so excited about that area that they would be a great choice to be a face and a voice for a show like that.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I think it's pretty hard to find people like that too, and not only from a company perspective, from an audience perspective. It's hard to find people when people shift or change, those people that you trust. It's hard to go find someone new, and I think that you probably have to balance both of those.
It's tough, and you know, I would say, you know, Beyond was a great example where we had Greg was just such an overwhelming, you know, voice. Like, he defined that show and that tone. And so then when you take that show and you reboot it, you're going to get something different. There'll be a portion of the audience that says, oh, that's not what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so it's up to us to say, okay, let's listen to the concerns of you know, the fans and see how can we improve the voice, or how can we adapt over time. Or we can say, you know what? We are trying to do something different. There will be other fans who will flock to it in the end, because we're certainly not replacing the talent. The talent is still out there, right? Greg's still doing his own show. And so if that's the kind of voice you wanted, you could consume that content, and you can check out our content as well.
They can live together.
Yeah, no, and sometimes they cross over too, and we're excited about those moments, right?
Greg and Tim were just on the IGN show. Mm-hmm. I said Greg and Tim were just on the IGN show for a little bit.
Yeah, you saw that. I think that was from some footage from RTX we shot.
Yeah.
And the IGN show is a great example where we said, okay, can we do something that is a little bit more, because, you know, we go out to events and we talk to people. Can we do something that's a little bit more where IGN is almost more of a guide to the internet? So bring in more YouTube voices, you know, give them a chance to appear on television. So we're becoming a little bit of an enabler for them as well. And then take some of the content that people loved online and also put this on the show. So it's kind of an interesting experiment for us.
Yeah, let's talk about the IGN show. How did the deal to put it on Disney XD come about? How did IGN go from the internet and all its other platforms to now it's on TV, which is another big platform to be on?
So we did, you know, years ago, we did a local show here in the Bay Area. It wasn't very good, but we tried our luck at it, worked with an external production crew from that TV station to put it on. It's just, you know, it ultimately, we didn't love it. We didn't love the quality of the show, and we didn't think that was a good direction. So when we were owned by Fox, so for a couple of years, IGN was owned by Fox Interactive Media, so within the News Corp umbrella. Before anybody has any conspiracy theories, they never, ever asked us to drive any political message, and honestly were very, very hands-off and didn't really tell us what to write or what to post. But under that umbrella, we thought there was the opportunity to work with the Fox mothership on bringing IGN to television. So this was, you know, Peter Chernin was at Fox at the time. He obviously runs a separate production studio now. And we pitched really hard. We had all these concepts, including this kind of variety show approach. We just couldn't make it happen. It was just that none of the TV stations, whether it was FX or Speed or, you know, or Fox proper, even though they have The Simpsons and some kind of younger programs, they just didn't see a time slot and a place for gaming content. And gaming content was seen as being niche. You know, it's the stuff that it's the stuff you talk to your friend about, but even at the time, you wouldn't even post on Facebook because your circle of friends was so varied that gaming wasn't really something you wanted to put forward as much as you love for movies. And comics, by the way, were the same way. And then something happened. Suddenly, comic book movies became the biggest thing ever. To the point it obviously started with Spider-Man and Sam Raimi, but Iron Man was really this big turning point where suddenly it was cool to go see Marvel movies, and it was cool to watch, the new Batmans. Or Tim Burton deserves some credit for the original too, but it was just became geek culture became mainstream culture. And so we've tried really hard to pitch all the big brands for years on making gaming a bigger part of the portfolio. And I don't know if you remember this, but YouTube didn't used to have a gaming category either. iTunes, the gaming podcasts are in a games and hobby category with car shows. Gaming, I mean, there was the App Store, but games weren't broken out at the time. Like, it took a lot of properties a very long time to embrace gaming. Weirdly, movies and music were always big verticals, and gaming weren't. And so we were actively trying to push that change, and at the same time pitch ourselves to major social platforms and emerging social platforms and TV stations to create content around games. And so Disney was really, we had heard that they were thinking about doing a little experiment where they would be creating, kind of switching Disney XD in the evening over, just like, if you think of Adult Swim, having kind of like this block that appeals to a different audience. So they didn't want to do kids TV. They wanted to do something that's a little older and was rooted in gaming. And we went in and we pitched and said, here's how we can do it. And it's not, the show isn't a moneymaker for us from a kind of production perspective. It was really a proof of concept. We wanted to show that we could do a daily show on television that looks good and is interesting and uses some of the content from the web, and it would feel right at home on TV. And so, I had hired last year the former producer of X-Play from G4. If you remember X-Play on G4, Wade Beckett. So he came on board, and I put him on the initiative to create original programming across platforms where we act as a production house rather than just kind of creating a website or a channel on a social network. And so he brought on Blair Herder, who had also worked at G4 and on X-Play. He's married to Jessica Chobot. You may know her. She used to work for IGN way back when. And so it all kind of came back together. And so with the Disney show, they were interested. We went in and we said, we've got this trusted team. We've got this trusted content. We can do this. And boom, somehow got into it.
Sorry,
that was a very long story, but it has been an uphill road where you figure a property like IGN that reaches so many millions of people. And honestly, if you stack us up to any of the big movies websites, we're just far bigger. But yet the battle was always uphill to be recognized by big platforms as being as meaningful and being able to attract an audience as efficiently.
Yeah, I had written down in June, so last month, you guys were getting 148 million people just on the website alone.
Well, that's cross-platform.
Oh, that was cross-platform?
Yeah. So, one of our strategies has been to put content on all these different platforms. That's a lot of people.
That is a lot of people. So
it'd be nice if all those people are on the website.
I'm sure it would be. That would be pretty darn cool, actually, if everyone was going to the website. I also I watched, I guess, the most recent episode. It was, I don't have cable, but it was on the website itself. And there was some Witcher 3 footage in there, and that was actually my footage from the guide. I was like,
oh my gosh, there you go. Yeah.
I was like, look, Mom, that's me. I'm famous.
That's hilarious. Well, that's the whole idea behind this production was, can we take some of the stuff we made for the web and show it to a different audience? Right? And we see this with IGN and Facebook and social and Twitter and Snapchat. There's so many users on all these platforms who have never seen a video we posted a couple years ago, even on the web. And you can take some of that content and put it on a different platform and get people really excited.
So then, for example, you guys were just at Comic-Con, and I think some Comic-Con episodes of that IGN show are coming out. How does the management go of, you guys are shooting content for the website, you're also shooting the IGN show stuff over there. and then you might be doing a special Snapchat video. Like, how does the management of shooting all these different platforms go at one event? That sounds like a lot of work.
In one word, poorly. No, it's a push and pull. And honestly, I mean, if you look at our output right now, you can tell that we are very, very busy when it comes to big events like Comic-Con and when it comes to the IGN show on Disney XD. So when we have tentpoles like that or events coming up, it takes everybody. It's not like we just bring in a completely new crew or we have an events team that covers E3 and Comic-Con for us. It's everybody here who has to rally behind it. And that means, you know, the users don't see all the planning work that goes into, obviously. I mean, just if you watch Comic-Con, you saw we had guests from, you know, everyone from the Guardians of the Galaxy to Harrison Ford coming in. And it's like, it takes a long time to build the calendar and work with all the movie studios in order to get everybody booked, right? And all that work is invisible to the consumer, though. And so you will see the volume of content diminishing a little bit when we have productions like that. And you certainly see it right now with the IGN show, right? Folks who are helping to host, like James Duggan or Miranda or Alana or Naomi can't be on the podcast shows as much because they're shooting in the office, and so you'll see that impact. For Snapchat, we have a dedicated team. Mm-hmm. Content is shared between the different teams, but we've got people who are just working on kind of adapting IGN content for that platform because, I mean, if you haven't tried out Snapchat Discover, it's so different from our website. It's vertical content. You swipe through. It's like almost like a story told in like 14 panels, that you swipe through. And so that just takes different people and we have to create unique content for it. And then same with, in the case of like Facebook or Twitter, there are certain pieces of content that we repost or we adapt for those platforms, but there's always an owner of there's an owner for social, for example. There's not an owner of Facebook for us, but there's an owner of social.
Well, for example, I was watching an Instagram story from you guys the other day just to kind of see how that compared to your Snapchat content. Yeah. And the Instagram one was, I believe, the one I watched was Ready Player One, Easter eggs you missed or something like that. Yep. And it was essentially just the video on IGN chopped up into different chunks to show kind of the cool things. But then you go to Snapchat, it's completely different content and performed a different way, and it's a unique way to split it off and stuff. So I kind of wanted to talk about this, and I think Snapchat is a really good launch point because you guys were kind of one of the first on Snapchat Discover, right?
I think we were in wave 2. So the original wave, and if folks here haven't used Snapchat before, Snapchat obviously is a messaging platform, but also has content partners who have unique channels. They're almost like mini magazines that refresh every day, and after 24 hours, they're gone. So it's not like the web where you can go back and see something you missed. It's just like Snapchat's video chat. It's fleeting. It disappears. So it's really cool because you get the sense of urgency. But, as kind of old school web creators, we're like, wait, our content is not accessible anymore afterwards? That sucks, we were a Wave 2 partner. We pushed really hard to be in it. They took a chance on gaming content because I think overall Snapchat's platform is a little younger, more female skewing. And so their most successful partners in Discover were a little bit more kind of in the celebrity news in that world, lifestyle, cooking, that kind of stuff. And so when we pitched it, I don't think they knew what they were expecting, but they quickly found out that we were able to coax out an audience that maybe wasn't checking out the other Discover channels. And it was a leap of faith because you had to bring on additional people to create these editions with the trust that you'd be able to monetize it.
So what's it like then? I see Snapchat Discover kind of as a trend. How do you guys set trends? What's it like to set a trend? You guys, were one of the first to have a daily video game news show with the Daily Fix way back when. You guys kind of created the E3 coverage we have today, where you guys did, in 97, you did our by hour coverage of E3, and now it's instantly.
Why did we do that?
Yeah. Why? And now Snapchat. So what's it like to set trends? How do you read that landscape?
Well, I mean, I'd say our trend setting is kind of like the thankless variety of trend setting. I see this all the time. When we publish into YouTube, you'll get commenters who will tell you what YouTuber did it first, and you're like, really? This YouTuber did a review first? Are you really sure? You get it. I mean, thank you. I do think that we set some trends. Certainly in the past, in the early days of the web, we kind of established the way a review now looks, or the way a homepage functions. If you look at IGN's homepage and you look at a lot of properties that came later, they are very similar. And certainly we borrowed over time from others as well. And when we started doing the Daily Fix, there was no daily show like that. There were certainly podcasts when we started our gaming podcast, like the One Up Show and stuff like that. But there's also gaming news on YouTube. Nobody was doing breaking news where somebody just talks to the camera and tells you what happened. Like it didn't exist, so we started that. It did really well, and then I think it just becomes it becomes a format that is accepted. And I don't think we should be getting credit for that. Obviously, it's something that the cable news networks have done way before us on television. But it's cool. I mean, it's nice when you work on a format and then you see it replicated everywhere. It means that you struck a chord. Rewind Theater is an example of that, where long time ago we said, how can we double dip on trailers? Trailers are so popular. So we said, let's just take a trailer and let's do a commentary of the trailer. Certainly there was pop-up video on, I think, MTV at the time, way back when. So, it's not a wholly original idea, but that kind of format then takes off and is used elsewhere. So to answer your question, long-winded answer, what's it feel like? You don't feel it. It's kind of thankless. The approach, I mean, honestly, I would love it if everything we did would stay unique to us, right? What we did in 1999 was we took a gaming site, we merged it with an entertainment site. So now, you got gaming content and Game of Thrones and Marvel in the same space. Now, when you look at our competition, that's exactly what the competition does.
Oh, yeah.
I prefer it if we were the only ones, but at least it forces us to innovate and then move forward and do something different, right? So right now you're looking at IGN, you're saying you guys have shows around PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo. That's great. I would say, okay, we got to push ourselves to have a show around Steam, because Steam is a huge gaming platform.
Oh, yeah.
And we're underserving that audience, and we have to have a show around streaming and discovery of shows on Netflix. And so, when others do what you do, and there's this this almost kind of like formatization of content, then you got to just keep on innovating and do new stuff.
That's pretty interesting to hear, because I'm kind of curious then to hone in specifically, what is the future of E3 coverage? You guys did the hour by hour in 97, and this year you guys teamed up with Twitter and did shows live through Twitter, which is a pretty great platform to engage with E3 news in general, because Twitter is instantaneous. That's kind of its thing. That's why I love it so much. How is E3 coverage going to evolve?
Yeah, for us, I mean, we started with the hourly coverage where we just uploaded a ton of content, right? And before that, it was daily coverage. All the magazines and websites, well, magazines would make you wait for 3 months, but websites would update once a day, right? They would come back and write the C3 content, and then weeks afterwards would still write articles. So we started with a daily publish, just kind of really pulled out the stops, and then we did audio programming, like a radio show, and then when we were ready for it on the infrastructure side, we made video programming. And so we believe in that approach where we kind of run these panels and we let users ask questions and provide that interactivity, like you're seeing a demo of Battlefront being played, Battlefront 2, and you're able to ask the developer question. We think that's a great role we can play, to be kind of the middleman for that. But that's not the end game. We do that at E3. We did that at Comic-Con. If you were on the ground floor at both shows, you would have seen that IGN had a fan meet and greet at E3 because it was open to the public. If you go to Comic-Con, we did a party for industry and we did a party for fans.
You lost your voice at the E3 one.
Yeah, that was every E3 it happens. I lose my voice. There are a lot of I run these tours for clients too, where I walk around with a microphone and a headset and just kind of give people a 1 hour look at where how the games industry is evolving and what the biggest games are. And like by the end of it, I have no voice left. But so the future of E3, if you ask about that one specifically, is it's really about what E3 is becoming. If E3 is going to become a bigger event for consumers, we are currently building a little fortress on the show floor. It's a little castle production studio that you can look in through the windows, but you can't interact. You can't come in. You can't really spectate. But if E3 becomes a more open event, I would like to build a stage, right? Mm-hmm. Why not service an audience that is there to wait in line to play their favorite game? Maybe we can entertain them while they're there.
That's actually not a bad idea. Mm-hmm. About a month ago, you did an interview with David Walensky of Don't Die.
Yep.
And you talked about kind of every console generation, you organize differently, you chase different types of content, and we're a different business now. So I'm curious, with the Xbox One X, the PS4 Pro, and then the Switch is an entirely new console, but how is IGN shifting now with this kind of new revisions of consoles and then a brand new one?
So a couple of years ago, so we used to organize ourselves around platforms. We're still organized that way on entertainment. We still have people assigned to beats, like we have a comics editor, we have an editor assigned to television and so forth, and we feel like that's the right approach. With gaming had gotten so broad that we felt, when there weren't any Nintendo games coming out for a month, it would be better to have the staff working on PlayStation and Xbox coverage. And so we broke up our beats and our platform teams and created something that was a little closer to how magazines or production studios are run, with assignable folks, assignable talent, a reviews lead and a previews lead. I think that worked really well for a period of time where we didn't know whether platforms would go away. Because the PlayStation is doing well. The Switch is a unique device right now. But for a while, all the consoles looked the same. Not visually, but they looked the same as to what they provided you with. And, Xbox and PlayStation obviously very close still. But PC gaming, everything, everything felt the same, and it felt like you could move between them. And I feel like that's not true anymore. A couple of years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said the PlayStation 6, maybe even the PlayStation 5, will not be a box. It'll be a service, and it'll be built into every Sony TV, and it'll be invisible. Like you'll never have the box again. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's happening. Certainly streaming gaming has not been accepted. The infrastructure isn't ready. That makes that easy. Mobile games are still something very, very different. They're not a replacement for your console games. And what we've seen now is the kind of all these different verticals. We've seen casual gamers flock to mobile. And, casual gamers are often the ones who will not engage with the content outside of the gaming experience. Whereas like a console gamer, somebody who's really into Final Fantasy or Fallout or Mario, will actually want to know how it's made and what's coming up and like where are all the secrets, right? So different audiences have developed. So I'd say we're at a point now where I'm almost thinking, do we do platform game teams again? Like, do you again hone in on the platforms and you just say it's okay if Nintendo doesn't have as many games coming out as the PlayStation? Because it's not just about reviews. It's also about the culture of gaming and the connection with the audience. And like, I don't know about you, but even when there's not a new game out, I've got plenty of Nintendo topics to talk about. Mm-hmm. Every NBC we say, what do we cut? Not what do we talk about? There's just so much. And I think the future revolves around specificity and assigning people more closely to beats so that they can connect with the micro communities that have formed around them. And by the way, that could mean having somebody dedicated to a single game because that single game is so damn big.
Like Overwatch or PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds right now seem to be very big games, and those communities are fervent.
Yeah, and from a media company perspective, it's very difficult to say, hey, I'm going to assign an editor to this game, right? It's tough to do because you're leaving so many other things on the table, and you might not be able to monetize content around a violent first-person shooter, right? Like maybe not as many advertisers want to advertise on it, but I'm thinking there's a way to figure out how to maintain and build communities like that, and make it work.
Talking about going back to beats and stuff, I just graduated in May from UCF with a degree in journalism, and their program is a little bit more in tune with newspapers and TV channels and stuff, like traditional news, not so much focused on games and stuff. But there are beats. You've got your police beat and your government, politics, whatever. So I'm kind of curious because you also have a degree in journalism from Berkeley, correct?
I went to the UC Berkeley Grad School of Journalism. I have a BA in, what was it called? Comparative culture from college in Japan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how has journalism evolved in your time being here at IGN and stuff? Because I think with the power of the internet and stuff, it's become more immediate. And at UCF in my program, I feel like the program had one foot stuck in the past and then one foot kind of inching toward the future. The program is very limited. A lot of electives that would focus on more forward-thinking things were cut due to budgeting. And I see the industry changing outside, but what was taught is a little bit more in the past. So I'm curious, from your perspective, you graduated with it, and now you work at IGN. How has it evolved?
So well, first of all, what I learned in journalism school is still all applicable to today's online world. It's because it was the foundation for, ethics and thinking about leads and angles and follow-ups. And so all of that is still valid. But what journalism programs focus heavily on is not editorial, is not opinion, it's facts, right? And so that's been the big change. If you look at even the TV news programs now with the highest ratings, they're not the programs that just report the facts. They're the programs that put forth an opinion. They're partisan sometimes, and oftentimes they're partisan. That's what's popular and gets people to tune in. It's personalities and people with a voice. And it's different from when I was a kid and you would watch the news on TV. You had anchors who would read you the news and get you the news, and they were good performers, but they weren't always journalists. If you look at 60 Minutes, obviously it's different, right? Some of the magazine shows like that. So I think what's happened is that, first of all, there's people's journalism, right? Anybody with a unique voice and an opinion can broadcast themselves nowadays. So the platforms are a commodity. Anyone can use them, which wasn't the case before. In order to get an audience, you had to work at a company that already had an audience. And opinion content matters a lot now because there's so much news out. I remember when CNN launched, their 24-hour news channel, there wasn't anything like that. Now it's a given that everything is accessible at all times in all languages around the clock, and that when something breaks, somebody gets you the news, and you've got social on top of that. So I think journalism has evolved. I think some of the original learnings, like use multiple sources, verify, all of that is still wonderfully valid. But the direction for us when we're hiring somebody is to not hire a writer strictly, but to hire somebody who has a voice and an opinion.
Yeah, I remember you saying on the Gamescast, episode 89, you said when you bring in someone for a writing job, you also put them on camera, you do a screen test with them as well. I think we have to almost be the Swiss Army knife of telling people stories, whatever kind of story it may be.
Yep. Yeah, and it's you can. I mean, that doesn't mean that there is no entry for people, right? There are freelancers when they break through, they may write up news stories, and those are they're very linear, very voiceless, very fact based, and that's a way to kind of learn the tools of the trade, the underlying knowledge you have to write a good story. But then when you come in and you become a full-timer, you have to have the capacity to find a new angle on what everybody already covered and become a voice on top of that.
You got to do a lot of stuff to break in, to do anything anywhere. It's a lot of work.
Look, it's tough. I mean,
oh yeah,
I won't lie. It's getting an editorial job at a games media publication. There's just so few. Anyone can become a YouTuber, but there's definitely this scarcity of games media jobs, and so they're popular positions because they don't require the same level of entrepreneurship. We would love it to, but as a YouTuber, you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to really dedicate yourself to it. You have to market yourself. And in the end, you got to resolve your own conflicts because advertisers come to you, and yet you're expected to also have a clean editorial voice. Games media properties don't have to worry as much because they have different people that can do different jobs.
Yeah, there's an ad department and then there's an editorial department, and they're two separate things.
Yeah, and their hosts, I mean, take Naomi, for example, right? Naomi Kyle, we were fine with her appearing in commercials for external companies because she's not a reviewer at IGN. Right? She will not be assigned a new game to review and pass on her opinion in an official IGN capacity because we want to make sure that we have that division and that kind of wall between the two.
It's a good wall to have. And I think this kind of leads into the next question about how has your role in the community evolved over the years? I see you on Twitter. You'll clarify people that might come up to you and say, IGN gets paid off, crazy things like that. You'll clarify and you'll confront those people in a very polite way and give them information. At the 20th anniversary party for IGN, you did resumes. You took people's resumes and did it. You're on NBC. How has your role evolved and how have you tackled that?
Yeah, look, back in 97, 98, I was on the front line. So I was the person helping generate the news and reviewing games. And so, my name was out there as somebody directly tied to the content. And, also working with the community. From the very get-go, I was one of the original IGN team members where when we launched the message boards, we were in charge of marketing them, right? Like it was our job. I mean, not assigned, we took it to make sure people would come there and talk. And so we would make ourselves available. And so that was always ingrained with us. And I think it's something that is a lot harder to do nowadays when you hire people, to give them that courage to step into a community that's already established. You're no longer starting from scratch and you're the OG user and people come to you and say, I'm here because you're awesome. You're stepping into a ready-made bed, and in some cases that bed has some nails and tacks in it, And so my role has evolved, from a content producer writer to be more of a manager. Certainly over the years, I oversee all content production on the edit and video side. I work closely with sales. I work with product and engineering departments on what we're going to do next with the site. So it's a lot less kind of direct customer facing work and a lot less content production. NBC kind of sucked me back in because Jose was so vocal. Like, he wanted someone who was old school and had covered the Nintendo beat, and he had someone like Brian who's kind of he's a funnier personality. I think I'm a little more straight-laced, so he thought he could assemble this motley crew and get something fun out of it.
I don't know. I think you're pretty silly sometimes too. Like, I saw you were tweeting out pictures of blue Joy-Cons with red straps just to get at Brendan.
Is that my level of silliness? Yeah. Brendan cannot handle having mismatched colors, so I do mismatch the colors on my Switch all the time.
I do think actually your Switch does look pretty good sometimes. Like with the straps. Awesome. I love it.
The guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
He's crazy. And I work with him a lot, but he's crazy. You mentioned you used to be in the trenches. Do you miss that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's honestly. I mean, what I really liked about this job back in the days was that you would create the content, but you'd also market it, and so you get this kind of you have this full ownership. You don't walk away. You don't just write something and walk away. Like you write something, you see the reaction to it, and you measure the impact, and then you own it. I really like that. I really like the instant feedback. If I think back at the early days, this is before article comments and all that. The consumers you were less likely to get feedback from casual consumers or consumers who weren't fans of your brand or your name or your content. And now, if I create a video and I post it on YouTube, I'll get feedback that says, who's this old guy, right? Because it's this ginormous content platform. You're putting your face out there in the audience that always new audience members will come in and they don't know who you are and they may not have the level of respect for what you do. So I think I got to say, I think it's much more difficult to become a content creator today. I think when you're a YouTuber, you're starting with zero audience and you're building it up, and then you have this kind of instant gratification of people who sign up really liking the content. That's why they're signing up and giving you feedback. I think it's a little different in established media where we have such a big following. And so I think it's a lot harder nowadays to get started and to have a positive feeling about what you do, because there are so many critical voices too.
Yeah, I certainly can relate to that.
I miss it.
Yeah. So I've got 3 more questions for you. They're a little bit more towards your perspective, personal, a little bit more. One's pretty lighthearted, and just what is your favorite game that you've reviewed? Because you used to review games.
Wow, Jesus. I have to remember what I actually reviewed. Well, I mean, it has to be Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
So, IGN started with the N64 and the N64 era. We went back and reviewed some older games when they were re-released on Virtual Console or in like retro collections. But, it's certainly that one. And my favorite console of all time is the Super Nintendo. Hands down. I'm a really big fan of the PS2 and the PS4 as well. But like the Super NES was so fantastic. So many of my favorite games of all time on that machine, but reviewed Ocarina of Time for sure.
How bummed were you when Walmart canceled all the Super Nintendo classics?
Don't bring it up. I you know what? I was suspicious. I'm like, this was far too easy.
For 30 minutes it was up. It was crazy.
Pre-orders were open way too long. Usually pre-orders hit when I'm like in the shower or something. Yeah. I'm in a meeting, I walk out and people go like, oh, you didn't get your pre-order in? Well, in this case, I got in, but I was suspicious, and of course, my suspicion was right.
Same. It was... Oh, well. Well, hopefully, Amazon comes to our saving grace. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Another personal kind of question is, how has being a parent influenced the way you see and play games? I don't know if you remember this, but I've played Destiny with you one time with one of your sons. Back when it first came out.
Yes.
We did one of the strikes on Mars, and I don't think we actually finished it because it was so hard and you had to go to dinner. But how has being a parent influenced the way you look at games and play them?
I've always been a fan of co-op experiences. When I got back into gaming, it was actually the Super NES era, the Super Famicom in Japan, so 1990. I had a really good friend, and we would play 2-player games, Mario Kart, Goemon, all these games together. I just really love that communal experience. I really love sharing something. When I watch a good movie, I immediately think, oh, my wife has to see it. Or when I go to a good restaurant, I immediately think, I gotta bring my parents here. And so I've always been about wanting to, like, I get enjoyment out of introducing somebody to something or experiencing something with someone else. It's one of the reasons why I don't think I got into a lot of PC games early on, except for the likes of StarCraft, for example, where it was all about LAN party at the university. And when I had kids, I couldn't wait for them to grow up and actually be the 3-player team that I have now. The downside is things get expensive. We already have 3 Switches in the house. I have to get a 4th one because now people have 3 kids. They're fighting over Splatoon, and we all want to play together. We want to do Salmon Run with 4 players.
Oh my gosh, that would be crazy.
And you know very well the age of the split screen game is kind of over, right? And so more often than not, you have to have the infrastructure to support multiplayer games. Overcooked, like there are games like that where you can play together in front of one screen, or Smash Brothers, and it's awesome. But there are a lot of games where it's just better to play with separate screens. I think I play more games. Like I play more games like Diablo-style games that I used to, simply because of that multiplayer factor. I've got interested parties at home. I don't think I would have played Minecraft quite as long if I hadn't had the kids to like build stuff with. And so I think they in turn encouraged me to play games as well. Now that I have kids, I discover games like Kerbal Space Program is one of those games that I played because my kids played it, Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then in turn, I got I think he was 8 at the time. I got my 8-year-old, he's 11 now, into Civilization. So, that it's a two-way street.
Have they ever not liked a game that you loved? Like, I know we talked about Ocarina of Time, and maybe a kid would look back and go, this is an old-looking game. Have they ever you've been excited to share a game with them, and they may not have clicked with it?
So, yeah, definitely. I mean, like the Zelda games, Breath of the Wild, I think, was the first game that they went completely wild over. When my oldest son finished it, my daughter finished it. But I think my daughter actually finishes a lot of story-driven games like a Final Fantasy, whereas my boys will not. They'll drive around the car in 15, and they're like, too many menus, and they kind of walk away after a while. Anything that where they have to follow a story, they're not as into as the kind of experimentation and just mayhem. Like when they play Skyrim, it's to create mayhem in the world, and like eventually they'll find their way back to quests, but they're much more like tinkerers than we are when it comes to story-driven games. But yeah, there are a ton of games. I keep on trying to get my sons to play Super Metroid, and I actually stick with it. And even though my oldest son finished Zero Mission twice and really loved it, he just can't, he's not playing Super Metroid.
Zero Mission's my favorite. I'm actually playing Fusion for the first time right now.
Yeah, he started Fusion, he never finished it either. Yeah. I got the little one, I got into Horizon Zero Dawn. The older one couldn't be bothered with it.
Yeah, I'm playing that one now as well. I'm toward the end of that one.
Personalities and things they stick with, and
Yeah.
I told them all, you got to play Arkham. You got to play the Arkham games. They're like very Metroid Prime-ish in setup, and none of them got into it.
Well, hopefully in the future then.
Yeah, we'll keep trying.
Batman's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
My last question for you is one I have for all of my guests on the show, and it's just, is there any piece of advice you would like to offer anyone listening, whether it's about being a content creator or getting a job in games media, just any kind of advice that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, look, I'm asked that question a lot, but
sure.
I think it bears repeating. If you want to get into content creation, it doesn't start with you telling someone that you want to do it and you want to be given a chance. It starts with you actually doing it. And that is so important nowadays. The person who applies themselves and, like you writing strategy guides, for example, who keeps at it and can point to a body of work that is not 2 months old, but is a day old, right? Like this constant evolution and applying themselves online will always have a bigger chance than someone who is, maybe trapped in a boring job and says, if only I was given the chance, I know I'd be really good at it, but can't get going. And so, my advice is if you're really seriously thinking about pursuing a career in media, whether it's games or entertainment or anything, you got to start a YouTube channel. You got to start writing stories every day. Once you have a body of work that people can look at online, you got to pitch. And the pitch is not, don't go to Uncle Pear. and tell them you'd really like to write. Look at the masthead of the publications and find the people who actually have the power to give you your start. So look for the news editor, pitch them on news stories, news angles. Look for the features editor, pitch them, a history of a franchise that could be very popular on that website. Make sure to see that they don't have it already, and just kind of be smart about it. As a starting writer, it's going to be very difficult for you to approach a reviews editor and say, "Trust me, I'm going to do a really awesome review," because they don't know who you are and how accurate you are. You have to earn that right to review something. But features are a great way to get in, and so focus on that. A lot of people do podcasts, and you will get a lot of applications with podcasts. And I think that's also the wrong format to start off with, because that content becomes valuable only if you can show that you're able to establish a relationship with the audience. If you send in a podcast and you say, I have 10,000 listeners, that's a different story. But if you merely produce, I sound horrible, but if you merely produce a good radio program, there's so many people who do that and submit that type of content, you're not going to be special.
Right. You got to do something that stands out, differentiates you.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if that hits home, Max, since you're recording a podcast, right?
Yeah.
But it, as a thing to put on your resume, if you've established an audience, that is always super valuable. But just the presence of multimedia is not an automatic shoe-in, just because the platforms are accessible to everybody now, right? And so you have to show development, and you have to show that you're tackling unique angles, and you can do things that others can't. I'll give you an example. We had a gameplay editor position open for a while. We still haven't filled it because we're looking for someone who is really, really good at games, but also has an entertaining voice, like somebody who can play a game. And, it could be Street Fighter, it could be Overwatch. Ideally, it'd be a couple of games and not just one, but who can showcase amazing gameplay capture and also do a narration that is entertaining. And it's been incredibly difficult to find that. Because if you're good at it, you probably already have a YouTube channel. You might not be looking for something as actively as someone who doesn't have that.
That's pretty interesting. It's I've done pitches before. I remember before Breath of the Wild came out, I was pitching around a history of Breath of the Wild and its development, and I reached out to Justin Davis and other publications. It didn't get picked up by anyone, so I just put it out myself. But I totally get the advice that you're sharing with people. Because it's stuff that I've tried to do, and I do think that work pays off. I mean, that's how I got started writing guides, was I just jumped in on Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I was like, I don't know how this works. I'm just going to do it. And then I got in touch with people, and I think that stuff works.
And one additional piece of advice is be dispassionate about what how you react to rejection. Think about it this way. If you had one Twitter follower, and you posted the most amazing tweet, and it didn't get retweeted and liked, and it was just sitting there, it's not because the tweet sucks or you suck. It's because, your time hadn't come yet. It wasn't spotted. There are all these different factors that contributed to that tweet not being discovered by your one follower and passed on to their one follower and their 1,000 and their 100,000. And it's the same when you're pitching a story. You may have gotten Justin when he had a full slate of stories, or he may have already had a piece on Zelda, or we're saturated on Zelda content, or it's a game that everybody in-house knows so well that they could crank out that feature themselves. And so whenever you're rejected or you're being ignored, you just walk away and you say, it wasn't time for that piece yet. Let me try. Let me try again. It's like video games.
Yeah, it's like when you can't beat a hard level, and you just keep going. No, that's a very good analogy. Thank you very much, Per, for coming on to this show and taking your time with me out of your day. I know you're very, very busy. So thank you for doing this with me.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for playing Destiny together and not conquering Mars.
Yeah, well, we can go back now. It's pretty easy now. I've done my fair share of Destiny time. So thank you all for listening to Behind the Pixel. Again, this is a product of Model Citizens Media. So go over to modelcitizensmedia.com and check out all other podcasts there. We've got our regular gaming one, Millennial Gaming Speak, which just passed 100 episodes. We've got Reeling in the Years, our music podcast that Logan and Michael do, and then our flagship, The Model Citizen Show. So check all of that stuff out. Per, would you like to plug IGN or anything else?
Yeah, go to my website. It's IGN.com. It's not mine. I wish then I'd be retired. I work at a company, obviously, that runs it. Check out IGN. And we recently redid our iOS app. The Android one isn't ready yet, but we changed it. So on our app now, what you can do, which I think is actually really cool, like if you want to watch NVC and listen to it, you can start it, and then you can minimize the window just like you can on apps like YouTube, and you can browse all the other content. So you can actually comment on every article, read wikis, all of that while the video still floats around and you can listen to the show.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's good.
I use it all the time. I was using it in Horizon when I was trying to find the power cells for the armor.
There you go.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again, and thank you all for listening, and until next month. Bye-bye.
Bye.